In 1961, the Freedom Rides were organized by the Congress of Racial Equality, also known as CORE. They were modeled after the organization's 1947 journey of reconciliation. During the 1947 action, African American and white bus riders tested the 1946 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Morgan versus Virginia that found segregated bus seating was unconstitutional. More on the 61 Freedom Rides coming up. This is KRT, Critical Race Theory. It's not the one they teach in law school, but the one banned in public schools. Today, we look at the Freedom Riders of 1961. Freedom Riders were groups of white and African American civil rights activists who participated in freedom rides. Those were bus trips through the American South in 1961 to protest segregated bus terminals. Freedom Riders tried to use whites-only restrooms and lunch counters at bus stations in Alabama, South Carolina, and other southern states. The groups were confronted by arresting police officers as well as horrific violence from white protesters along the routes, but also drew international attention to the civil rights movement. The 1961 Freedom Rides sought to test a 1960 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in Boynton versus Virginia that segregation of interstate transportation facilities, including bus terminals, was unconstitutional as well. A big difference between the 1947 journey of reconciliation and the 1961 Freedom Rides was the inclusion of women in the later initiative. In both actions, black riders traveled to the Jim Crow South, where segregation continued to occur. The original 13 Freedom Riders, 7 African Americans and 6 whites, left Washington, D.C. on a Greyhound bus on May 4, 1961. Their plan was to reach New Orleans, Louisiana on May 17th to commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision. That ruled that segregation of the nation's public schools was unconstitutional. The group traveled through Virginia and North Carolina, drawing little public notice. The first violent incident occurred on May 12th in Rock Hill, South Carolina. John Lewis, an African American seminary student and member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, white Freedom Rider and World War II veteran Albert Bigelow, and another black rider were viciously attacked as they attempted to enter a whites-only waiting area. The next day, the group reached Atlanta, Georgia, where some of the riders split off onto a Trailways bus. On May 14, 1961, the Greyhound bus was the first to arrive in Anniston, Alabama. There was an angry mob of about 200 white people surrounding the bus, causing the driver to continue past the bus station. The mob followed the bus in automobiles, and when the tires on the bus blew out, someone threw a bomb into the bus. The Freedom Riders escaped the bus as it burst into flames, only to be brutally beaten by members of the surrounding mob. The second bus, a Trailways vehicle, traveled to Birmingham, Alabama, and those riders were also beaten by an angry white mob, many of whom brandished metal pipes. Birmingham Public Commissioner Bull Connor stated that although he knew the Freedom Riders were arriving and violence awaited them, he posted no police protection at the station because it was Mother's Day. Photographs of the burning Greyhound bus and the bloodied riders appeared on the front pages of newspapers throughout the country and around the world the next day. That drew international attention to the Freedom Riders' cause and the state of race relations in the United States. Following the widespread violence, CORE officials could not find a bus driver who would agree to transport the integrated group. So they decided to abandon the Freedom Rides. However, Diane Nash, an activist from SNCC, organized a group of 10 students from Nashville, Tennessee, to continue the rides. U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the brother of President John F. Kennedy, began negotiating with the governor John Patterson of Alabama and the bus companies to secure driver and state protection for the new group of Freedom Riders. The ride finally resumed on a Greyhound bus departing Birmingham under police escort on May 20th. The violence did not stop there because the police abandoned the Greyhound bus just before it arrived at the Montgomery, Alabama terminal, where a white mob attacked the riders with baseball bats and clubs as they disembarked. Attorney General Kennedy sent 600 federal marshals to the city to stop the violence. The following night, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. led a service at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, which was attended by more than 1,000 supporters of the Freedom Riders. A riot ensued outside the church, and King called Robert Kennedy to ask for protection. Kennedy summoned the federal marshals, who used tear gas to disperse the white mob. Patterson declared martial law in the city and dispatched the National Guard to restore order. On May 24, 1961, a group of Freedom Riders departed Montgomery for Jackson, Mississippi. There, several hundred supporters greeted the riders, but those who attempted to use the whites-only facilities were arrested for trespassing and taken to the maximum security penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. That same day, U.S. Attorney General issued a statement urging a cooling-off period in the face of the growing violence. He said, quote, "A very difficult condition exists now in the states of Mississippi and Alabama. Besides the groups of Freedom Riders traveling through these states, there are curiosity seekers, publicity seekers, and others who are seeking to serve their own causes, as well as many persons who are traveling because they must use the interstate carriers to reach their destination. In this confused situation, there is increasingly the possibility that innocent persons may be injured. A mob asks no questions. A cooling-off period is needed. It would be wise for those traveling through these two states to delay their trips until the present state of confusion and danger has passed and an atmosphere of reason and normalcy has been restored." During the Mississippi hearings, the judge turned and looked at the wall rather than listen to the Freedom Riders' defense. That had been the case when sit-in participants were arrested for protesting segregated lunch counters in Tennessee. He sentenced the riders to 30 days in jail. Attorneys from the NAACP appealed the convictions all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which reversed them. The violence and arrests continued to garner national and international attention and drew hundreds of new Freedom Riders to the cause. The riots continued over the next several months, and in the fall of 1961, under pressure from the Kennedy administration, the Interstate Commerce Commission issued regulations prohibiting segregation in interstate transit terminals. So now, because of the Freedom Riders getting beat with baseball bats, jailed, their buses burned, called the N-word, you can now go to the bus terminals in Birmingham, Alabama, and Jackson, Mississippi, and use the facilities just like white people. This has been Critical Race Theory, the Freedom Riders of 1961. Thanks for checking in. Please like and subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. We'll see you next time.